The 2019 13-inch MacBook Pro is still a very good laptop in 2024. However, as weird as it is for me to say this, I don't think it's going to be my top recommendation for a laptop that you should get. And it's not because this laptop has a major flaw or anything. It's just because for a few $100s more or a few $100s less, you can get something that's going to be pretty similar or better in a lot of ways. So let's say you want to buy a 2019 MacBook Pro and you're comparing to other laptops that are like a bit more, a bit less. You have the 2017 MacBook Pro that I can find for under $400, and that has a really similar design. It doesn't have that touch bar thing and Touch ID. It also goes out to Mac's Ventura, so it doesn't support Sonoma, I know. But you save an extra $150 with that laptop. But then for $150 more, when you get into almost the $700 range, you can buy an M1 MacBook Air, which has, a better keyboard. It doesn't have that touch bar, but it has, it still has Touch ID. It'll last you an extra year or two. It has Apple's new M1 chip, and the battery life is a lot better. You get, instead of like 10 hours on this, more like 15 hours on the M1 MacBook Air. But I still think this laptop is really good for people who like touch bars, because this laptop you can find, on the used market for under $500. Whereas if you want to buy like the newer M1, Pro version of this that still has that touch bar, you're looking at spending $750 on the used market. Now, the design of this laptop pretty much looks like every other MacBook. It still has the same like edges and stuff. It still has like the same display. But what really makes it stand out compared to some other MacBook models out there is that touch bar thing that I mentioned earlier. And what that touch bar is essentially it's a little display that displays like little icons and stuff to, adjust things like the brightness or to use as a fill shortcut in Excel and just stuff like that. And for some people, they find it very handy because it allows them to be efficient with their work. However, for me and quite a lot of other people out there, it is very annoying because, if you want to adjust the brightness, for example, you have to tap on it, then it opens up another menu, and then you have to use a slider to adjust it. Whereas if it's just a typical keyboard, you just press the button and it adjusts it for you. And then next to the touch bar, you have Touch ID. So you can just rest your fingerprint on it, unlocks the computer, but you can use it for Apple Pay and stuff, which is very handy, especially if you're in a rush. And the keyboard itself, I would say typing on it is good enough. However, it is kind of firm, I would say. I wouldn't say it's as firm as like typing on a table and stuff. But the key travel on this is so minimal that I feel like it's a lot firm compared to other laptops out there. But I would say compared to my M1 MacBook Air, it's not as comfortable, but I'd say it's good enough for most people. It's just, if you're the type of person who writes a ton of essays and stuff, pages and pages, and you're mainly doing a lot of typing on this, maybe consider getting a newer 2020 or newer MacBook that has that new scissor switch mechanism keyboard. As for ports on this computer, on the left side, you have two Thunderbolt/USB-C ports. And then on the other side, you have a headphone jack. And there is an upgrade model you can get that has another two Thunderbolt/USB-C ports. I don't have that one, and it's kind of hard to find a lot of those. But I'd say for most people, you're going to be just fine with the two USB-C/Thunderbolt ports. And if you need other ports too, like a SD card slot or HDMI slot, you can find adapters on Amazon for, I'd say, around $30 or so. As for the display itself, the display is pretty much similar to every other MacBook you've seen out there. I would say with this, maybe the features of the display that make it stand out compared to something a bit older, like a 2017 or 2016, is this has something called True Tone. And what True Tone does is it takes the color temperature of your environment, and it'll adjust the display to match that, so the colors look more accurate on the computer. Which can be very nice, at times, but I think it's a really minor improvement compared to the 2017. It also has something too called P3 wide color gamut. So this isn't going to matter for a lot of people out there, but if you're the type of person who uses Photoshop and stuff like that, it probably does matter a bit just because what P3 wide color gamut means is that this display can display a little bit wider range of colors compared to a typical LCD display. Now I'm going to talk a bit on performance, and performance on this laptop is still really good even in 2024. Things like Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, Google Sheets, all that type of office stuff still runs really well on this and gets the latest and greatest updates, which that's probably what I think this laptop is best for, is people who like to do office work and stuff. And because this computer still gets the latest and greatest updates, like Apple's latest updates like macOS Sonoma and stuff, I don't think support's going to be really an issue, at least for a little while. In terms of like latest and greatest updates, I think Apple would stop giving it like the name updates like macOS Sonoma, macOS Catalina, etc. in about like 2 years from now would be my prediction based off of what I've seen in the past. And then Microsoft Word and all those types of applications, Adobe, I think you'd be able to get 4 to 5 years before the latest and greatest support for those applications really becomes an issue. But overall, like all that type of stuff, still support on this computer and still runs very well. Now, video editing on this laptop too is also pretty decent, I'd say. It edits 1080p footage very well, so if you are the casual video editor who edits like 1080p footage and stuff, this laptop is still very good for that. However, if you're somebody who like edits 4K footage or like really does a ton of video editing and stuff, you may want to consider like a 14-inch, 16-inch MacBook Pro, M1 or whatnot. I think it's like $1,200 and stuff, which is a lot, but if video editing is your main thing, like that's the laptop to buy, is those types of stuff. But for the casual video editor and whatnot, this laptop is good enough for you. Even with 8GB of RAM, even with the processor, it's still good enough. As for gaming, this still supports Apple Arcade, so if you have like an Apple Arcade subscription, you can still play those games on this laptop. And then other games too, like Minecraft, still run really well. I was able to run Minecraft at like around 60 frames per second on default settings. And I can imagine like if you download a mod like Optifine or Fabric, you'll probably get even like 90 plus frames per second. As for storage, you can get this computer with anywhere between 128 gigabytes to 2 terabytes of storage. I would recommend though, like the average person go for 256 to 512 gigabytes. And the reason why I say this is I think the base storage, 128 gigabytes, is not enough for like a vast majority of people now. I think 256 gigabytes should be like the absolute base. And if you can find 512 gigabytes for not much more, maybe get that. As for more storage, like a terabyte, 2 terabytes, I don't think it's going to really matter unless you're like backing up huge, massive files and stuff. But for like the average person who like does make casual video editing or stores a lot of documents and stuff, 256 to 512 gigabytes is definitely going to be enough for you. Another thing that's really interesting too about this laptop is battery. So Apple says that this laptop can get about 10 hours of wireless web battery life and stuff. And I would say like realistically, because these laptops are a few years old now, the battery health is going to be around that 82%, which is what mine is at. So you're likely going to get 8 hours of like wireless web battery life instead of 10, which is still good enough and better than like quite a few laptops out there. But it's definitely not as great as something like the M1 MacBook Air, which probably going to get around 14, 15. But for like casual work and stuff, that ain't bad. It's just you may want to bring a charger with you just in case you do like a heavy performing task and it dies quicker. And then one thing I'll mention too, if you are buying these used, is make sure that that battery health is above 80%. Most shops and stuff check to make sure it's above 80%. But like if you're buying this in person and stuff from like somebody on Facebook Marketplace, there's this application called Coconut Battery that I can use to check the battery health and make sure it's at a good battery percentage, like above 80%. Realistically, I'd try to shoot for around 85%. But if it's at 80%, I think you'd be just fine for a few years. But something to keep in mind as well is if you do need to get a battery replacement on this, it's $250 if you get from Apple, and I would say about $150 if you do it from a third-party repair shop. So just keep that battery cost in mind when you're going to buy this computer. And then speaking of repair costs and stuff, I have some repair costs here to share with you. So if you want to replace the screen on this from like a third-party repair shop, You know, it doesn't have the Apple logo on the back, but the screen's like pretty similar to what Apple has. You're looking at around $370 to replace the screen on that, which is quite a lot. And then the trackpad, you're looking for around $89. And then keyboard, all that type of stuff is going to cost over $350. So what can you learn from what I just said there? Well, if you're spending about $400 to $500 on this laptop, buying it on the used market, and you break a screen or you break like the keyboard and stuff, the fact that it's going to cost, you know, about as much as the laptop, especially when you factor in depreciation to fix, you pretty much total the laptop if you break anything on it. That's not like a minor repair like a trackpad or a key. And then going back to like a quick comparison to the M1 MacBook Air, which is what I recommend if you have extra money to spend. The M1 MacBook Air gets up to 17 hours of battery life new. It's known for its better processor, which I don't think it matters if you're doing like regular like schoolwork, office work and stuff. But if you are like a bit more professional in terms of like video editing and stuff like that, it may matter. And then the M1 MacBook Air 2 is also going to last you an extra year or two, which can be very nice and maybe justify that extra cost. And then even though the M1 MacBook Air doesn't have that touch bar, it does still have Touch ID, and the keyboard is that newer scissor switch keyboard, which makes typing a bit more comfortable and, you know, easier in my opinion. But anyways, I'll go leave links to both the 2019 MacBook Pro and the M1 MacBook Air in the description. If you do need a more in-depth review on the M1 MacBook Air, also leave a video up on screen for you to check out for that more in-depth review. But for the average person, I still think this is a pretty good laptop, especially if you like that touch bar and whatnot. But anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoy the video.